Give me a few seconds, guys. I'm just setting up.
Yep.
Robert.
How you
How are
doing?
you? Good, good. I'm very excited. How are you?
Excellent, excellent.
It is, first of all, an honor to see you in this virtual space and have a conversation with you. So I'm really excited about that. Let me just thank you.
My pleasure. Good to see you too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I would like to know if you would like to be prepared for the questions, or do I have permission to just start asking you?
No, you can just ask away. I don't. I'm fine. I'll answer it if I
Perfect.
can answer it. I'll answer it. If I can't answer it, then I'll say I don't know. So, and that's
Perfect.
okay too.
That's totally perfect. And then the beautiful thing about it is this podcast is called Search for Consciousness. So either
Mm-hmm.
way, we're both seeking higher truths, and it'll be a pleasure to build with you. All right. So on
Awesome.
that note, I'll just start recording the podcast. Let me thank you again for your time, and I'm
Thank
excited,
you.
man.
Thank you.
I'm really excited, man.
Me too.
All right, let's make it happen. So I'm going to say 3, 2, 1, and we'll just start. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Steven Rivera. I am the founder of Mindful Wizard LLC, a meditation company based out in Brooklyn, New York. And I also have the honor of running this podcast. So I'm really excited, and let's just jump in. What is going on, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of Search for Consciousness. Today, I have the one and only Robert Edward Grant in my presence. I am so excited to just thank him and welcome him on the show. My brother, thank you again.
Thank you.
So when I got the response from you, I was a little intimidated, and I said, "Oh wow, they actually responded." So it's an honor. I'm excited. And I just want to jump right in. So for those of you that do not know who Robert Edward Grant is, he is a polymath. He is a very wise intellectual, which covers so many diverse spaces. And we are so blessed to talk to somebody like this because we're starting to bridge spirituality and what I would call physics, if you will.
Mhm.
So this is the man to speak to. So Robert, thank you again and welcome on the show, sir.
Thank you.
So
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. So let's start off with this. I'm really interested in your mind, and I wanted
Okay.
to know what motivates you to study the things you study.
I think, it's funny. Someone said to me probably about 10 or 15 years ago, he came to me and he said, Robert, I need to know. We were in Las Vegas. We were there with friends, and he said, is it love or money? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, for love or money, one or the other, make your choice. And I said, it's definitely for love. And and I said, well, what's the question? He said, what motivates you? And I said, well, I got the right answer because that is what motivates me. It's love. I love what I do. It's never been about money for me. I don't know. Maybe that's a weird thing for me, but I've never been kind of motivated by the financial rewards and stuff like that. And along the way, because I probably wasn't motivated by it, in a way, and I was just always grateful for having it. I tended to manifest abundance in the process without ever thinking that was my end goal. It just kind of came along with the path, I guess. But for me, doing all this work in physics and math and unified, science and spirituality, which I don't really see a distinction. I think the two are complementary. In fact, I believe that to achieve higher degrees of scientific understanding, that the answer is through a higher spiritual sort of experience and being able to see through higher dimensions of experience as well. So for me, it's all about love. I literally love what I do. I wake up every morning. It doesn't feel like work at all. And that's why, sometimes you'll see probably posts from me at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning or something. And it's usually exactly when I got it. And I have this philosophy also of sharing it immediately. And sometimes that might mean I wrote something down wrong, whatever. But the nice thing is you can edit it and and fix things on it if that is the case. But I generally will post it like right away, and I love doing it because it's like a realization of the self. I believe that we live in a you inverse rather than a universe, and that every experience we have is actually us experiencing ourselves. We are the universe observing itself. And you could define that universe, and sometimes people refer to words like entropy. And we say that entropy is sort of like this boundary of chaos, right? Well, maybe it's not really chaos at all. Maybe it's just an encryption. Maybe it's an aspect of ourselves that we just don't understand yet. And if we peek through a little bit, we can. And every time I feel like I find a new thing to learn from, whether it's in music or art or mathematics or physics or chemistry or whatever, I feel like it's learning another aspect of that encryption.
Yes, sir.
And what's the whole reason for being here? To learn who we are.
So thank you for that answer. It actually excites me because I see myself as a younger version, or whatever you want to call it, a young truth seeker. And I love that our paths collided, because when I ask you these questions, I know for a fact you're really going to resonate with them. So thank you again for that. I love the TED Talk, by the way, about the intentional decisions. That was incredible. But I don't want to stay on the physical. I want to get real out there with you. So I appreciate that.
Okay.
Now, my next, I guess, to warm up would be, because I see you as Da Vinci. Like, I saw how many patents you hold. You're like the spiritual, scientific Da Vinci. So I wanted to ask you, what is the real Da Vinci Code?
Well, the real Da Vinci Code is something that is related to the answer I just gave in my personal view, I guess. I believe that there's so much more for humanity than just what we have experienced so far. This is just one blip in time that, by the way, we chose. We chose to have this experience. I believe that too. And I believe that what Da Vinci has done is he has encrypted through time a message about human empowerment. And part of that you can find in my book, Philomath, which just came out not long ago. I just happen to have a copy right here. And it is exactly about that, about the empowerment of humanity. When humanity realizes that it's a human being, not just a human doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe we have been, in this last 2,000 years in particular, we have absolutely been in a world mired in judgment of others, in a world of difficulty and struggle, in a world where we every day judge everybody else on things without even realizing it. And in so doing, we judge ourselves, and we disempower ourselves through that judgment. We make ourselves weaker. And we can easily fall into, I'm a victim, or the universe happened to me, when actually another way of looking at it is to say to ourselves, the universe is happening for me and happening through me. And I believe that that's the message of Da Vinci. I believe the real Da Vinci Code, and yes, it is surrounded by all this mystery and intrigue and everything of the Great Pyramid and how the Great Pyramid get involved in here. And he definitely encrypted the Great Pyramid into the Vitruvian Man, the upper right angle, from the center at the navel up to the upper right side of the square that is in the square and circle that are on the Vitruvian Man, is exactly the slope angle of the Great Pyramid, which is a very specific number, 51.8436 degrees. That's not just like a random thing. It comes out to exactly that. And in order to do that, it's not even a real squaring of the circle, because the square should be the same area as the circle, and it's not. The square in Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man turns out to be exactly as a ratio. If we consider the radius of the circle being being one unit, then the circumference of that and the area of it that we derive from that, the area would just be pi r squared, comes out to be pi, right? Because 1 squared times pi equals pi. So the circle area should be pi. The square area should also be pi, and it's not. The square area is 2.7182818, which is the Euler number, which, by the way, that's a very exact number, because that number happens to be the most important number besides pi and the golden number in all of math and physics. And yet it was only discovered by Isaac Newton in the 17th century. Wait a minute, Da Vinci lived in the 15th century and early 16th century. So hundreds of years before Isaac Newton, discovered the Euler number, Da Vinci encrypted it exactly inside of the Vitruvian Man. This wasn't just an artist. The artists of the day and today, they analyze his work incessantly. It's still the most expensive artwork on the planet. The Salvator Mundi sold for $450 million, including $50 million commission. When you think about how the world has been looking at his work purely from an artistic perspective, that's because they don't have the reference point to even understand the mathematical connections. And he did. He understood them to the nth degree. So this was all encrypted so that we could understand what is the darkness. And that, when I say darkness, could be the boundary of entropy. We could also define it as darkness as the boundary of ignorance of the self. And that is what I believe he has tried to encrypt and teach us all, so that we can understand how to awaken ourselves through our chakras and to figure out and remember who we are and why we're here, and then live our own true purpose and do it in a way that is in acceptance and love and not one of judgment.
So I'm glad you said that, because as I'm awakening to everything that's happening, I almost see your discoveries as if they're aligned with the time, almost as if it is meant for you to access this information. The same way Ramanujan was out there doing his little math things to push physics forward is the same way that you and I are having this conversation to, hopefully awaken those that need this information. But I did want to bring that up, and I'm glad you said it, because I think it's like the time is being prepared for something greater. And you are one of those agents helping that push forward. So let me thank you from humanity's side.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I do believe that everything happens for a reason. Some people believe that miracles don't exist, while as other people might see it as every day in life itself is a miracle. And by the same token, you could say the same thing about mathematics. Some people see randomness and other people see pattern. I designed a random number generator. And it's funny because I was, and I'll announce this here, nobody knows this yet, but I'll announce it here, that some people know that I have a TV show coming on in the fall, and it's called The Codex, but most people don't know that it's on Gaia. So it's going to be on Gaia. I have my own show. I'm very excited about it. I filmed 13 episodes of it, and they've already asked me to do 2 more seasons, and I haven't even aired the show yet. And they're going to be probably joining me for some travels coming up too. But I'll say this, that while I was at dinner one night with some people that were from the company at Gaia, one of them said, "Do you realize that your initials, REG, mean random event generator?" And I thought, oh my gosh, that is so hilarious, because I've always been thinking about the acronym as a random number generator. So RNG, in fact, I designed an RNG that has the highest degree of randomness available right now, as much as any photon generating device. And we use irrational values to be able to derive this very high randomness. Well, I never even contemplated the notion that my name initials were the same as random generator. Oh my gosh, that just blew my mind. I have to say, I said thank you to the woman who told me that at dinner. And I said, you know what this means? Later tonight, I'm going to be laying in bed in my hotel room just staring at the ceiling for like 3 hours, wondering what the heck that means. But the reason why I say this to you is that some people see randomness, other people see pattern. And it's a function of our own sort of consciousness. When we realize that everything around us is actually patterned, then we're constantly seeing what messages the universe is trying to give to us. This is so we can connect with our higher selves. And I fundamentally believe that Ramanujan, a very famous mathematician, who is known at Cambridge University as probably the 2nd greatest mathematician of all time, only because he passed away at the very young age of 32. There was a great film made about Ramanujan's life at Cambridge University, and the name of the film is The Man Who Knew Infinity. I highly recommend it. But Ramanujan claimed that the way he got all of his mathematical proof work, because he had no formal training, was from the universe.
Yes,
It
sir.
would come to him as a download. He's tapping in to a higher dimensional frame where we can access in the Akasha, we can access information about science and mathematics and music and physics and everything. And I fundamentally believe that. And I think that's been one of the big stumbling blocks for the world, is that we have thought that introducing spirituality into science has been anathema. It's antithetical to a successful scientific process. And it's kind of funny, because if you look at the person who's credited with creating the scientific method, it's actually Rene Descartes. And this Cartesian method came out of his own spiritual growth and expansion. He's the guy who came up with I think, therefore I am. He was absolutely a polymath, absolutely not someone who was in this reductionistic world and separating all the different disciplines. He understood music, he understood philosophy, he understood mathematics, he understood physics. It is only us lately that have separated all these different disciplines out so that never the twain shall meet. And actually, it was Aristotle who decided that mathematics was going to be the word associated with the science of quantity. Actually, the word mathematics didn't ever mean the traditional sense of how we think of mathematics today in the Greek language. You know what mathematics means? Mathematics was the base and seat of all learning. So Philomath, the book that I wrote with Talagwanam, means lover of learning. It doesn't mean lover of mathematics. It means lover of learning, because mathematics is just a foundational understanding to all learning. It's a language of learning. And we stop thinking of it that way, and so therefore, we're separated from all these other subjects. A physicist doesn't generally become a great musician, although there are exceptions. A mathematician doesn't generally become someone who is a super great artist. That's why we don't know how to bucketize these people, like Leonardo da Vinci. Was he a mathematician? Well, he didn't leave a lot of math work behind. Well, I would beg to differ. He did it in an artistic and beautifully elegant way in all of his works. All of it's mathematic. So what is it that we have fallen in love with, this notion of separation, this notion of, spirituality is antithetical to science and scientific pursuit? I think all these things are going to go away now. These false separations are all going to go away, and we can bring light to our lack of understanding. Light just is a reference to our own consciousness and ability to comprehend. We shouldn't be afraid of darkness. We should be trying to embrace it, to understand it, to expand our awareness.
Well said, brother. Well said. And I appreciate that. I love learning about numbers. And the more I start to get into these theories, I understand how we have to have the backing of these principles that you mentioned. So it's funny that you brought up Ramanujan and his understanding of math, because my question to you, and I was hoping we can get weird, is where does your genius, let's do it, let's fucking do it. Where does your genius come from? Like, what is the source of your inspiration?
Well, first of all, I believe, and this is a quote from Walter Russell, who I highly respect, and he said that genius is self-bestowed and mediocrity is self-inflicted. I fundamentally believe that. I think everybody has some genius within them. You look at people that have had, faced severe trial and challenge. For example, Helen Keller. Helen Keller, one of her quotes that I just absolutely love is, "The only thing worse than blindness is to have sight without vision."
Mm-hmm.
Now, she was blind. She was a paraplegic or quadriplegic. She couldn't move. She couldn't hear. She literally lost all of her senses. And yet she had the profundity to be able to make such a statement like that. Like, the only thing worse than blindness is to have sight without vision. Wow. And to me, that is speaking to this divinity we all have within us, this divine nature that we can find in ourselves when we start to learn to transcend duality and dualistic impression and perception. when we start to realize that everyone we judge are just reflections of ourselves, and when we are triggered by them, it's actually we're trying to heal and reintegrate that person and that aspect that we just feel like we don't like and we're triggered by back into ourselves through acceptance and compassion. This way of thinking changes how you tap into higher knowledge and wisdom.
Yes,
We
sir.
always have thought wisdom is something very separate from genius, right? We think of wisdom as being a very different notion than being able to come up with like Einstein genius, but yet we would say that Einstein was very wise because he was a very wise person, right? I mean, he also had some pretty amazing quotes that were very philosophical in their orientation, but he's also an incredible genius. But we have always thought that those two things come from different places, that genius maybe comes from either our base intellect or our ability to learn concepts that others have maybe discovered and found, or maybe it's creativity to a certain extent, but this notion of wisdom seems to only come through experience. Hard life, the school of hard knocks, right? That's what we tend to think about. I look at it all as integrated. That the source of genius is as much wisdom as the source of wisdom is genius. The two are connected. It is not something that is separate. It's only us that creates the illusion and polarity of this separation of perception, and it's not really separate at all. So for me, the source of, the genius question you pose is that I literally just go within and listen, and I will start to tap into something that is, some refer to it as I experience clairaudience, clairsentience, and clairvoyance. Up until I was, I'll tell you a story. When I was 19 years old, I lived in South Korea. And I had a dream in the middle of the night. And in my dream, my girlfriend back in Nebraska, who was actually coming back from college over the Christmas break from Utah back to Nebraska, in my dream, she fell asleep at the wheel with one of my close friends in the seat next to her. So she was driving. And I saw this very vivid dream where she was driving a beige Toyota, a car I'd never seen before. It was not her car. And I even saw the license plate number. I remember it vividly to this day. She rolled the car in a ditch, and it killed my friend. And I saw that she had blood all over her face as well. So I woke up in the middle of the night, and the car was upside down in this ditch, driving through like cornfields, but on a highway. And I woke up the guy that was living in the same apartment with me, and I said, hey, I just had this crazy dream. And at the time, I was a missionary. So I was like a Mormon missionary. And, everyone does not everyone anymore, but people at that time, I'm not Mormon anymore, but people at that time that would go to be a missionary for 2 years, you'd go do this very harsh experience. And I'm glad I did it. I have no regrets. I have no regrets about it whatsoever, because I learned so much from it. But I woke him up and I said, I had this horrible dream. My girlfriend was in this car crash. And I said, I want to call the mission president and ask him if I can call home. This is back in the late 80s, right? And in the late 80s, we had fax machines, and that's how we communicated. Or we would just send snail mail letters, and it would take 3 weeks for a letter to get back to the States. So I called the mission president, and I said, it was like, I remember it was like the 18th or 19th of December in 1988. And I called the mission president. I said, hey, I had this bad dream. My girlfriend was in a car accident. I just want to call and make sure she's okay. And he said, no, you can't call home. You can only call home when it's on Christmas Day. You're allowed to call twice a year, on Christmas Day and on Mother's Day. That's it. So I said, oh, are you sure? He's like, yes. So I called on Christmas Day. And I was very happy when my parents answered the phone, and I said, hey, I'd love to talk to my girlfriend. Her name was Tasha. And I said, I'd love to talk to Tasha. I had this horrible dream about her, that she was in this terrible car accident. And they went silent, and they said, can we call you back? I said, sure. So here I was in South Korea, big time difference. And I said, when are you going to call me back? They said, they'll call back in like 30 minutes. So they called back in 30 minutes to my apartment in Seoul. I wasn't in Seoul at the time. I was in Gwangju, South Korea. And so my parents called back in about 30 minutes or an hour. And I remember getting on the phone, and all of a sudden my girlfriend was on the phone. So I was like, hey, are you okay? I had this horrible dream that you were in a terrible car accident and you rolled in a ditch, and it was super detailed and super vivid, and it literally freaked me out. I wanted to call you on the day that it happened. And she went silent. And I said, is everything okay? She said, yes, I'm fine. I'm totally fine. No, everything's okay. You don't have to worry. I'm okay. And so a week goes by after the call. And I get my mail. I get this letter in the mail from her that was written before the time I spoke to her on the telephone. It was like written, I talked to her on the 25th, and it was like written on something like the 20th or something like that. So it was 5 days before I actually spoke with her. And in the letter, she explains to me how she was in a horrific car accident 9 hours after I had the dream. So yes, I've struggled because I was like, geez, if I could have called her, then maybe she wouldn't have had the car accident. But 9 hours after I had the dream, she had the car accident. And exactly as I saw it. Even the car, it wasn't my car, it was my friend's car who was killed in the passenger seat. I saw that in a dream as a remote vision in 1988. And from that point forward, I had many experiences where I could see, even before that, I always had this ability to kind of tell what was going to happen in the future. I always had that. I could always see around corners. And in business, it served me well because I could predict trends. I could see when things were going to shift and where markets would go. And I could file patents, on those things so that I could at least protect those ideas so others wouldn't keep the world from getting those ideas. And that's why I file patents, not so people can't have access to them. It's so people can have access to them. And it's just one of those things people don't often understand. But I have experienced clairvoyance my whole life. Clairaudience came much later. And clairsentience, and I've never talked about this with anyone before, so this is the first time that I'm talking about it on any kind of live thing. My first experience with clairsentience was in 2014 on Bastille Day, where I had an experience that I could just immediately know like a remembrance. And the same thing happened, I discovered this Alpha Omega on the rim of the sarcophagus in the Great Pyramid in 2018. And for a week before, actually 2 weeks before I discovered it, I was drawing incessantly in my notebook Alpha Omega. I still have all the photographs of it. And the time I took the pictures of those photographs, I have all of it. And I kept seeing Alpha Omega, Alpha Omega, Alpha Omega. And I remember calling Nassim Haramein, who's a physicist, and saying to him, hey, you need to come with me to Egypt because I'm going to discover something. And I've got the trip planned already. And he said, oh, I really would love to come, but he couldn't make it. And so, there I was in the Great Pyramid, on May 7th, 2018. And I'm in the pyramid, I'm looking down at the sarcophagus, and the light catches at a certain angle. But right in that moment, I literally remembered being inside the pyramid when the Alpha Omega was pressed into the granite. And I watched it, and I looked down, and exactly where I remembered it being, there it was. And it was just one of those weird, bizarre moments. I mean, I have to say, it was just really bizarre. And I remember calling Nassim afterwards, and I said, hey, I sent you a picture of something I discovered in the Great Pyramid. And now that has turned into 8 things that we've discovered in the pyramid inside the King's Chamber. That's supposed to be a room devoid of anything. And these aren't just any markings. These are markings that are perfectly mathematically oriented to the construction of the room itself. It's 5.6 inches wide, and it's 5.605 inches wide. And you square that, it turns out to pi times 10, 31.41596. which happens to be the exact perimeter of the room in meters. Pi times 10 meters is the perimeter of the room of the king's chamber. Here we are, the most studied room on the planet, the most studied box in the most studied room, the most studied building, the tallest building in the world for over 4,000 years, at least, if you believe that dynastic Egyptians built the Great Pyramid. When you think of it in those terms, like, how in the heck did I remember something? That's how I found it. I remembered it. I'm just being honest. There's just, I mean, that's exactly what happened. And I've had many experiences like that, and most of the stuff that I put out mathematically, and now I have a whole book on it, and there's so much more. We've already got enough to write 3 more books. All of this work came through clairsentience.
Yes, sir.
So, and then I started getting clairaudience a couple of years ago, where, you know, some people talk about, in spiritual circles, they talk about having spirit guides, etc. I also have experienced that as well.
So thank you for all that information. It's hard, like, trying to know where to attack from, but I appreciate you saying all that.
Hang on one second. Come in. Have a good trip. Sorry, one of the guys from my team just told me he's leaving to Hawaii on vacation. So,
good timing, huh?
Yep. Go ahead.
So,
sorry about that.
No, it's all good, brother. It's all good. So I'm actually grateful for you bringing that up, because I've studied some of the things you've done in the King's Chamber. I've also had similar experiences where I've felt things, or I guess sensed things, and then you walk into them later in your life. So that's why I kept saying, like, encrypted was an interesting choice of words, because that would mean that you need the password to access the material. What I'm thinking is consciousness is the password, and the more you move up in vibrational alignment, the easier these things come to you. The other day, 6 months ago, I was sitting in my room over there, and I heard a beat, and I know this sounds crazy, but I'll say it, and I'm like, no, I know that song, and it's one of the songs that my coworkers was working on. He produces beats. He's made 90 beats, and that beat is specific because he named it Mindful. I'm the Mindful Wizard. So when I told him, yo, brother, I heard that beat, he said, there's no way. We worked on that 6 months ago. How does it go? And I was able to recount the entire beat. So that leads me to believe, yes, sir. That leads me to believe that these things are happening vibrationally. I appreciate you sharing the story about the car crash. And I'm sorry that someone passed away during that.
Yeah, no, it was very sad. But, you know, all of these things, I think that the greatest encryption of all is ourselves.
Yes, sir.
And remembering and learning who we are.
Yes,
and
sir.
If you know, I don't know if you've seen my documentary film that I recently made. It's on my website at robertedwardgrant.com. But it's like a 20-minute documentary film on this encryption that we call ourselves.
Yes, sir.
You are, right, Mindful Wizard, you are the divine encryption. We all are. We're all just divisions of the number one at the end of the day.
Mm.
And nobody's any better or worse than anybody else. That's the other beautiful thing about it.
Yes, sir.
Everything in this universe is such, it's a beautiful place and experience that we're able to live here. You know, a lot of people think of Earth as like, I got to get out of Earth, man. This is like escape room. I got to get off this planet. I remember the first time I met Nassim Haramein, he said that to me. He's like, I'm like, what's your life goal? He goes, I want to go off planet. And I remember thinking, oh, that's so cool. I would love to go off planet too. You know, I've had dreams about that since I was a kid. But I think the thing that I'm now coming to the conclusion of is that we can fall in love with this place. And the moment that we no longer desire, and the moment that we are granted the ability to sort of go to the next place, whatever the next place is when we fall in love with this place. And I'm not talking about from the context of dying and getting reincarnated, because we all are going to do that, right? Or maybe if this is our last lifetime, then we can go to the next iteration and stop the cycle, the looping, right? And I think that the answer to get to the stage of no longer having to go through the reincarnation process is to truly fall in love unconditionally with this experience right here, right now.
Well said, brother. I would also, with your permission, add on that in order to get to the Akashic records, right, in order to obtain that level of feeling, for lack of a better word, was I needed two emotions, trust and love. I needed to trust in my own ability to resonate to that level. And then I needed to feel what you would call love, because that is the most, I don't want to assume if you've been to these places, but for those of you that have no idea what I'm referring to, the Akashic records are like the soul's Google, and they are tap-inable or downloadable, to use your words, brother. So thank you for that. I wanted to know if you had maybe a few more minutes to ask a few more questions. Is that okay?
Sure. No, I can keep going.
Oh, let's make it happen. God is good. All right. So now I'm excited, brother. I'm ready for you, man. I'm so ready for you. I had like 15 questions. I wanted to take advantage of your time in the best way possible, of course. So I'm watching a lot of your posts, and lately it seems as if you've been inspired by the golden ratio or the Fibonacci sequence in reference to spirals and spiral galaxies. So I wanted to know if you can add some or enlighten us with why the Fibonacci sequence lately.
Well, and it's not necessarily the Fibonacci sequence, although it is related to the Fibonacci sequence. What I've been interested in is logarithmic spirals. Most people think that when they see a nautilus shell, for example, that the nautilus shell is a Fibonacci spiral. That's a common misunderstanding, and it's fine. Lots of people, even mathematicians, do that. It's not actually a Fibonacci spiral. It's a logarithmic spiral. And the logarithmic spirals, actually what I've discovered and found is that the foundational basis of logarithmic spirals is polygonal geometry and polyhedral geometry. So that means that a triangle has the ability to create its own spiral. A square has the ability to create its own spiral. An octagon, a hexagon, a heptagon, they all have their ability to create their own spirals. And if you remember back to kind of like a trigonometry class and probably maybe pre-calc, is that there's something called a logarithmic base value. And that logarithmic base value is defined as some number, right? And usually the logarithmic base that everybody uses to compare everything against is the Euler number, which was embedded right inside of Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. It was the area of the square compared to the area of the circle. So that's kind of a mind blower that he understood that hundreds of years, again, before Newton discovered it. But what I found is that actually the natural logarithm is polygonal geometry. It's as simple as that. This notion that, it has to be all tied back to Euler. And so what scientists have often done is they've taken the natural log, which is the Euler number, 2.718, and they have applied it to spiral galaxies and to things like nautilus shells. They know, if they've done this type of work, that the Fibonacci sequence is not actually the nautilus shell. It's close, but it's not the same. And so they then adjust it with a pitch adjustment. So they change the pitch of the spiral, the tightness of the spirality, but they keep it still based on the Euler number. Now, why is any of this important? Well, because if you change the pitch of a spiral, you've changed the geometry of the spiral. It's no longer Euler as its logarithm or exponential value. It's not. It's just simply not. So I looked up all this work and thought, well, the Whirlpool galaxy is probably the archetypal spiral galaxy that we can see and experience. And of course, we can't see it with our naked eye. But I decided, well, let me see what is the exact geometry that associates with that Whirlpool galaxy. And the way you define it is very simple. You take a right triangle. So every geometry, a hexagon, can be broken into equilateral triangles, right? So you've got six separating equilateral triangles going around it. And it's unique because the hexagon in particular has the same value as a radius of a circle that's exoscribed around it, would equal as well the side of the hexagon. So the radius is equal to each side. That's a unique characteristic of hexagons. So what you could do then is to find the spiral pitch of an equilateral triangle is you simply, I'll just draw it for you here. You simply draw out an equilateral triangle and realize that, of course, every equilateral triangle can be split into two right triangles, just like that. Right? You see the two right triangles?
Yes, sir.
And how you define this logarithmic value is the hypotenuse, which you might remember, hypotenuse is this side right here.
Mm-hmm.
The longest side is hypotenuse, and this is the base, and this is the height. So the hypotenuse divided by the height, which is going to be shorter. So hypotenuse divided by height, just like that, right? Hypotenuse divided by the height gives you the logarithmic base value. It's as simple as that. So we know that a hypotenuse divided by the height for an equilateral triangle is a number that is defined as 2 divided by the square root of 3, which turns out to be 1.1547. So that's the log base. So then what happens is it creates a spirality off that differential. So then the next triangle would go, I would take this number and I would take this exact same length here, I would have it here, right? And then I would draw another triangle that would go like this up to the same center point, and then it would create another scalar wave. And then I would take this length, I would lengthen it by 1.154 and do the same thing here, and then you'll notice that I'm creating a spiral like that around by connecting these dots of the center points. So I did that with the Whirlpool Galaxy and found that the Whirlpool Galaxy is absolutely a hexagon spiral. A perfect match. It's a hexagonal spiral. The Nautilus shell, I also posted on, is exactly an octagonal spiral. Now think about if we could visualize mathematics like this so much better, what impact that could have on children and how they feel about mathematics. When you could see it as, oh, that's just a simple hexagon, and the way you can draw this spiral in another way is just to keep drawing a hexagon and then rotate the hexagon slightly and inscribe a hexagon within that, and then rotate it again and then inscribe a hexagon with that right at its centers, right? And so you have this fractal of a hexagon getting smaller and smaller and smaller into infinity, and then you just connect those dots just like this and it creates a spiral, a beautiful spiral. And all things in nature manifest as these spirals because the ubiquity that we have of the right triangle is that everything in the universe can be derived down to right triangles. An octagon has right triangles. It's broken into right triangles. A nonagon, a dodecagon, and that's also true for all the polyhedra and polytopes. There's nothing that's not a right triangle. So life is about spirality. And to me, that's also about the crown chakra. When you start to engage deeply into the spiral nature that is the universe, that is when you're entering into the next stage of dimensional experience. It's all related to the lotus. The expanding lotus, the 1,000, right, and 50 petaled lotus. And that is all relative to the right triangle and the spiral. But today I just learned something entirely new, and no one's even heard this yet. I just got it about 2 hours ago in a research team meeting, that there is a such thing as a left triangle. A left triangle. Now think about it. In mathematics, this has been kind of a conundrum for me because I've been like, what the hell? You know, everything in math is like there's a positive, there's a negative. There's a odd, there's an even, right? There's a prime, there's a composite. There's something opposite across all of math. And yet, why do we have this very right? You know, I learned German, so it's like recht, right? And it's like a right triangle. And it's kind of very judgmental and harsh and hardcore. Well, one of the things a lot of people don't know is that if I draw a triangle that's a right triangle, whatever the values are for that triangle can be like this. So let's say I have a triangle that's the same as the one in the Vitruvian Man. So if I just take the top of the circle, I go to the bottom of the square and then frame the base of the square, this is the proportional reference that I'm going to have. It's a right triangle that is 24 for its height, 26 for its hypotenuse, and 10 for its base. So this is kind of a unique right triangle. But what's very interesting about, not only is it unique, happens to also be the exact right triangle proportions of an octagon, just like the Nautilus shell. But more important than that, if I flip these into reciprocal values, so 1 over 24 and 1 over 26, I can create another triangle that is now, it was 26 for the hypotenuse, now it's 1 over 26 for the height. It was 24 for the height, now it's 1 over 24 for the hypotenuse. The reciprocal values must flip. And then you get a different value for the base. And the value for the base is a very important esoteric number that relates to Alan Green's work. John Dee, the Enochian tables. The Enochian tables were a matrix of 24 by 26, an encryption. And the last number on the Enochian tables was 624. Now what's interesting is when I do this, I've got 24 and 26 that now flips to 1 over 26 and 1 over 24, because 1 over 24 is longer, so they can still be the hypotenuse, but it has to flip like the shape of an X. Just like that. You guys see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, but the base value on 1 over 26 and 1 over 24 comes out to be 1 over 62.4. That means that it has some reciprocal relationship with the number 1. Makes it a very special number indeed. And 624 is unique because 26 times 24 equals 624. Okay, so this same triangle, albeit much smaller, becomes another dimensional frame of the right triangle. And it has the exact same proportions, the same inner angles and everything. With those same inner angles, this becomes the left triangle. It's the left triangle. And through this left triangle, we're now seeing that we can find new Pythagorean theory relationships between these two triangles that nobody knew existed before. Like the one of, maybe all I have to do is multiply 24 by 26 to find out the base value of the left triangle, which then allows me to solve all the other proportions of that left triangle, right? Because I could just then take the reciprocal value of one of them, and if I have 2 sides, I can solve all 3 sides plus all their inner angles and everything else. So this is an entirely new concept that we've named the left triangle. And it's still a right triangle, but it's in its opposite reciprocal inverse relationship. And these are the types of things that we, work on here every once in a while, right? We use things like this to find new ways, and we're just about to publish a paper called the Sum Product Conjecture. And I'm very, very excited about it because I believe it has big implications for physics. And this type of understanding, I looked at math as a language. I speak 8 languages. I lived in 9 countries. So I looked at math as a language, and could I learn something entirely new about that language just by looking at it and changing our perception of it? And is that not just a metaphor for life? So many people hate math because they don't have a relationship with it. They didn't realize that they actually already did have a relationship. If they like art or if they like music, that is math. It's just a function of understanding the visual connections that already exist between them that enlightens us to the stage where we fall in love with it. Is that not a metaphor for our earth experience as well?
Yes, sir.
Sometimes it's as simple as just changing our viewpoint or our perspective, and everything shifts. And that's where humanity, I think, is right now. I think we're on the precipice of that major shift. And I, for one, am very, very excited about it and what the future will bring.
Yes, sir.
It's not going to always be easy. But we didn't choose to be here because it was easy. It's worth it. That's why we're here.
Oh, that was beautiful. I could imagine the amount of hours that it takes to just figure something like that out. I see a lot of people in the comment section dropping some religious spiritual gems, as above, so below, the crown chakra, the wisdom that we're tapping into. So thank you for that. I also saw some people hint at the hermetic sciences. So those are interesting to just think about and hear about. I also believe that these scientists, specifically like Pythagoras and all these good people, I believe they were into the esoteric arts, though. They were studying things that weren't taught in
No
school.
doubt. No
So it
doubt.
makes sense. So I appreciate you for saying that. I know
Well, I'll say
Instagram.
this, that
Yes, sir.
I fundamentally believe that one of the incarnations of Leonardo da Vinci was Pythagoras.
Mm.
So, and he encrypted a lot. You know, the Vitruvian Man strangely has in the upper right-hand corner the number 126 as if it's a page number. But Da Vinci wrote everything backwards. Everything he wrote was in backwards mirrored text, except for a few references on that page. Every time he writes in non-backwards mirrored text, it's encrypted.
Mm.
So think about it from his perspective. He writes everything in backwards mirrored text except for the stuff that he writes the correct way forward, and then nobody notices it because they think, oh, that's the right way forward. That's how he encrypts things. He
Mm.
encrypted 26 in the upper right-hand corner of the page when it was never in a book. So why did it have a page number there? 126 is what allows us to double the octave, to go to the next stage. 126 is the relationship replacing in music the major third interval of 5/4 with 1.26, or the equivalent of the cubed root of 2, another 3 and 2 relationship. And 3/2, it's just another way of saying 3/2. Cubed root of 2 looks very similar to 3/2, which is the perfect fifth. When we combine those two, we have the right harmonic resonance to create a beautifully perfect scale that we call precise temperament tuning. And I think what we only have to do is slightly change our tuning of our perception. We recognize that our brains, you know, one of the big aha moments I had was realizing that my brain is not a storage device like a hard drive. My brain is a radio. And every thought that comes into my brain is actually a frequency that I'm picking up like a radio station. My thoughts aren't local to my body or local to my brain. And science hasn't been able to prove that. I met with the Dalai Lama. I took Nassim, and I took a stem cell scientist with me, along with several other physicists and mathematicians, in late 2019. We went to the Dalai Lama's palace in India and spent the day teaching him physics and math. And it was one of the most incredible experiences ever. It was really amazing. But we had a discussion with him about thoughts not being local. And even our stem cell scientist, Hans Kierstead, is a genius scientist. He was at UCI for a long time, and he's been a pioneer in stem cell research. He said, look, we've proven already in science that thoughts are not necessarily local to the biology. So they are literally like a radio reception. It's like a frequency. When we realize that our brains are radios, and then we embrace the notion that our heart is just the tuning dial, and this is a quote from Nassim Haramein, then everything shifts. And sometimes it's simply shifting just a little bit the dial to get that perfect radio station signal. It's the exact same thing for us in our daily lives. We only have to change our perception of things. You know, we're all very hard on ourselves. The world is not a tough place because people hate each other. I believe the world can sometimes be a tough place because people hate themselves. We are a society that suffers from extreme narcissism, and narcissism is not true self-love, it's self-loathing. We hide aspects of ourselves from everyone else that we know because we're ashamed. It's time for us to transmute the shame. It's time for us to embrace the others in the world, everybody that we judge and everyone that we don't feel like we like. We should embrace and accept. It's hard to do it. It's very difficult to do it But one of the things that someone asked me just before I got on this call with you is they said, how do you put in a daily practice non-judgment? And I said, well, every time I want to judge somebody, I do two things now. I say out loud, which is embarrassing. I've come to get used to it in conversation. Whenever I'm about to judge someone harshly, I say, I am that I am. Because the thing that I'm casting as a judgment is the thing that I actually am that I don't want to see in myself.
Mm.
I'm the one extolling the bullshit and I'm lying to myself. And I'm just trying to deflect anything that that person has or is and say that's not me. But we've all seen that, haven't we?
Yes, sir.
We all have seen people that do that. We've all seen ourselves do it. We've known when we've done it. So that's the first thing I do. And the next thing I do is I stop and ask myself the question, why was I triggered by that person? What in me is begging to be integrated that I'm having a hard time accepting and embracing? And sometimes that leads to a tough lesson. Very often it does. But when you start looking at those lessons as being the gems of life that make life worth living and experiencing, your whole world changes. And it is a very beautiful awakening. Thank you very much for taking the time with me today.
Yes,
Mindful Wizard, I love the name.
I'm honored to speak to you and learn from you, my brother. So I think they're going to wrap us up. Anchor's being weird, so I just want to take that note to really appreciate you before they kick us out and tell us we don't have any more time. You were incredible. I learned a lot from you. I just want to personally thank you. Let all the followers and listeners know that this episode will be dropping the first Sunday of August. If they want to tune in, it's anchor.fm/mindfulwizard. And I would appreciate a follow and we can build from there, my brother. Thank you again. Any last thoughts before Anchor tells us good night?
No, people say, I guess one final thought is people say love and light. It's kind of like the new age way to say F you, right? It's pretty funny. And it's funny to me for a different reason, because I believe that love is the gravity that connects the entire universe. Gravity is darkness. So what we're really saying when we say love and light is darkness and light. And that is expression of this new paradigm, which is that everything is blended. There's nothing that is bad. These concepts of bad and good, it all comes down to perspective. When we look in this lens, everything in our lives change. And I would much rather be the person that is called a sucker, which I've seen people get called suckers before, for always being positive and seeing the blessing even in the difficulty. But I know the people that live that way, and they are much, much happier.
Amen. Amen, brother. Thank you for
So
that.
love to all of you. Love and light, not in the context of love and light, everything perfect. Love and light in the context of light and dark. We are all of that. I am that.
Yes, sir. Spoken like a true wizard, my brother. Thank you for your time and your brilliance. I learned a lot. And thank you again. I'm excited. Thank you, guys. Episodes dropping every Sunday at 4.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, brother. So the recording is done. I appreciate that. That was a lot of fun. And I'm around, brother. If there's anything I can ever point you in any direction, please let me know. I've studied some spiritual stuff, and I would love to talk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if when this gets recorded, as it's recorded, I'm assuming that all the comments and everything are also going to get recorded too, I'm guessing.
Yes, sir. So what I'm going to do is when we get off, I'll share this live and it'll be up and running forever. Then I can send it to you and you'll have a copy of it as well. And then when it airs on the 1st of August, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I can also send you like the audio so you can have it and keep it and do as thou wilt. So I'm around, brother.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Be well, brother.
Bye-bye.